Why are we doing this? Quick read, just to make sure that we understand the context, right? So can you guys just read it in your mind? I'll give you about 30 seconds. Tell me when you want me to go to the next screen. Okay, there are only 3 blanks here and then there's 2 blanks here. So let's finish this first. So read, time starts now. Read fast. Now the whole context, if you ask me, right, is revolving around this. What's the repeat word you see? Kinship. Kinship. Right, you will see that in the next paragraph also if you paid attention, right? Kinship. So here also there's kinship. Kinship. So the paragraph is, so what is this kinship? Somebody had that question, right? Have you heard the phrase kith and kin? Yeah. Have you heard the phrase kith and kin? When you say kith and kin, what are you talking about? You're talking about kith and kin means near and dear ones, right? Relatives, family. Yes. So this context is around that. Now let's go back, right? Let's look at each of it after the hyphen. Yes. The function of a hyphen again is to also kind of expand on what the previous thing is talking. It gives you additional explanation on that. So it's important for you to pay. So if there is a difficult word and there is a hyphen following it, usually good writers explain what that word is. Yeah? They paraphrase, which means they restate that word in a simpler way for the readers to understand. Okay. Now let's look at it. Humans have probably always been dashed by their kin, those to whom they have been related by blood or marriage. See that? Very good pointer. See, I have this hyphen, right? And I have who's, so in case you don't know this word kin, it's right here. Those to whom they have been related by blood and marriage. That's what kin means. Okay? Relatives, family, right? So humans have probably always been dashed by their options are linked, supported, surrounded, driven, chased. Now given the options, right, if you look at the following sentence, it says, but the size, the composition and the functions of their families and kinship groups have dashed tremendously. People have lived not only in the nuclear family, so it's talking about family that is close to you, that is around you, right? So the context is not talking about whether they supported you, and chased and linked are kind of illogical options, right? Those of you who said linked and chased, always been linked by their kin doesn't make sense. In the context, we're talking more of, look at this, they're talking about size, composition, functions of the groups, right? So it's mostly to do with just physiological aspect, surrounded, those to whom they have been related by blood or marriage. The humans. The kin is those to whom, referring to the thing, they have been related by blood or marriage is the humans. Okay. So not driven by their kin, right? Supported, we don't have enough context in the passage. So the closest fit or the better fit, right, or the most effective word in blank one is option C, surrounded. Humans have probably always been surrounded. So usually the tendency is to have your relatives close by, even if you get married, sometimes you feel that you will need the support of your parents, right? If you look at girls, until and unless there is a clause where, the husbands live in a completely different city or travel or they go abroad, but mostly the preference is to be around family and relatives. Second blank, it says, but the size, the composition and the functions of families and kinship groups have dashed tremendously. Options, varied, evolved, distinguished, changed, morphed. Now for every blank, I am going to fall back on the next sentence. Now the following sentence after the second blank says, people have lived not only in the nuclear family made up of just the parents and their offspring, which is standard in the West and has been found almost everywhere. They have lived in dash families and in formal clans. They have been avunculocal, they have been ultrolateral, they have been conscious of themselves as heirs of lineages hundreds of generations deep. So for me, this whole context, right, from starting from people, it's talking about the variety in which groups have been formed. right? So it is not talking about this species evolved, so you can eliminate option B. There is no distinguishing happening here, right? And morphed again is an illogical fit here. Between A and D, because I am relying on the next sentence for me to throw some light on the context, I will move towards varied rather than changed. It is normal, or sometimes you might say, it's a collocation. Groups have changed tremendously, but here we are talking about the variety of these groups, right? These are your clue words. We look at, I actually don't even know what the meaning of this, but I'm familiar with avunculocal. It will come, in terms of your, let's say you live with your husband's mother's brother's family, right? Then it will make sense. So avunculocal I'm familiar with, but honestly I have no idea about this word, ultrolateral. If anybody has, please tell me. Anyway, so option 2, varied, right? Kinship groups have varied tremendously, meaning because the next context is giving about the variety in which these groups have formed. One is nuclear family, and this is easy, the third blank. What are our options? Extended, different, compact, combined, clad. We obviously know nuclear family. Another variation that we are familiar with is what? Has anybody given the answer? I'm sorry, I was not looking at the comments section. Did anybody give the answer for the third blank? It's an easy one, not a difficult blank at all. You might be confused with the second blank, but you cannot be confused in the third blank at all. Extended family, right? One is nuclear family, the other one is extended families. So what is standard in the West? Nuclear family. Everywhere, almost everywhere, and has been found almost everywhere, they have lived in extended families and in formal clans. They have been avunculocal, which is talking about, it's expanding on that, right? So extended family makes more sense. Imagine you are living with your mother's brother's family. Anybody found out the meaning of to evolve? The word evolve is usually used in terms of developing or something that is gradually achieved. So in the context, they are just talking about the various groups that are formed. So evolved doesn't make sense to me. These sort of groups or the composition has varied. The size in the family, right? The size in the family, there's variation. Nuclear family, father, mother, kid, right? Once the kid grows up, gets married, he leaves the father and mother and moves and has his own family. That's a nuclear family. Some people prefer to be in an extended family. So there the size will vary. The composition will vary. The functions of the families will vary. That's why it makes more sense to. So I want you to, these are your clue phrases, right? The size, the composition and the functions of the families. So these will vary, not evolve. Are you following? That's why varied is a better option. What about ultrolateral then? Did you find out that one? Anyway, once you get the answer, let me know. We're moving on. So first 3 blanks we've covered. Okay. So let's complete the last sentence. However, constructed, the traditional kinship group has usually provided those who live in it with security, identity, and indeed with their entire scheme of activities and beliefs. So they are still making reference to the extended family, right? The traditional kinship group. Moving on. The billions of hunter-gatherers who have lived and died over the past several million years have been embedded in kinship groups, and when people started to form about 10,000 years ago, the universe remained centered on kinship. Options for fourth blank. Known, nameless, old, many, brave. Okay, let's look at this. Now, I'm going to go from the fifth option. Okay. Now, very, very specific options like about 10,000 years ago, right, from that time. Yeah. So, we're talking about billions of hunter-gatherers who have lived and died over the past several million years. So, do you think it's practically possible that all of those billion hunter-gatherers were known? Illogical. Nameless makes more sense because there were so many of them, right? Old, brave are very, very specific. The context is not giving us enough information. We don't know out of those billions of hunter-gatherers, right, that all of them who lived and died were old. There could have been young guys as well who died, right? So, old and brave is not the right words because the context is not giving us enough information. Now, many for me, most of you came back and said many. I would not say many. Why? Because it is very redundant in meaning because of the word billions of hunter-gatherers, right? Billions itself means many only. Why do you need many billions of hunter-gatherers? Doesn't make sense for me. It has to be nameless. Why? Because there are so many of them. It's impossible for you to remember each and everybody, right? So the nameless billions of hunter-gatherers who have lived and died over the past several million years have been, so this makes sense. Logical sense is option B, nameless. Got it? Yeah? And then let's move on. The universe remains. Now that there was a durable form of wealth which could be hoarded, right? Grain, some families became more powerful than others. What happened? Society became stratified. Stratified means society started forming some hierarchy, right? In our society we have based on class. So you have lower class, you have middle class, you have upper middle class, right? So what are they saying? Society became stratified. So each of them were divided by their position in society, right, with their economic background and the job nature and the employment that they do. So you started dividing. How much are they making? And genealogy became an important dash of justifying and perpetuating status. So we are referring to genealogy and we are referring to society. So here I need a word that gives the meaning of what? Some sort of a medium, right? I am looking for a word that gives me the meaning of medium out of my options. Which is that word? Option A means, option B tricks, option C plan, option D area, option E none of these. Is genealogy and what are we talking about? We're talking about means, right? This was the means by which society and genealogy were justified and perpetuated status. I want you to go back and look at that context. Now that there was a durable form of wealth which could be hoarded, grain, some families became more powerful than others. That's why we have these divisions, middle class, upper class, lower middle class, all that, right? And genealogy became an important dash of justifying and perpetuating status. So what is genealogy? Anybody? Tiwari is asking. I assumed this is something that you would know. It's not a very difficult word, right? Use genes. Genealogy, basically the study of your family history. So how did they justify and perpetuate status? Genealogy was the medium, was the means through which this happened. So I wouldn't say genealogy is an area, but genealogy is a study. So that is the means through which they were able to justify and perpetuate status. Are you following? Does it make sense now? Yeah? Okay. See, so basically at face value, this seems like a difficult passage. But the truth of it is, it's not really, right? It's not really a difficult passage. Actually, when you apply a little bit of logic and if you are understanding certain words, I think, you know, words like stratified, all of these are kind of getting in, like you might get confused because of that. So if you come across a question like this, I wouldn't advise you to waste time during the exam.